You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, we've got some major news here as a Trump lawyer has a bad day in court. But first, for the viewers watching right now, just a reminder that Glenn and I will be covering the entirety of the Trump trial happening right now. So if you want daily updates on what's most important in this trial, please make sure to subscribe. The link's right here on the screen, also in the post description of this video. Okay, Glenn, let's talk about Rudy Giuliani. He was seeking to reverse a jury verdict in his defamation trial for $148 million. What happened here?
Yeah, so he filed a motion with the trial judge, Judge Beryl Howell, who presided over the defamation case, trying to get her to throw out the massive $148 million verdict that was entered against him for his defamation of two Georgia state election workers, Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman. This is something of a predictable result, but upon review of the 5 errors that Rudy Giuliani raised in this motion that he filed with Judge Howell, she said, no, none of these errors warrant throwing out the judgment that was the considered judgment of the jury. And in fact, she went so far as to say, one of the 5, you're not doing anything more than, quote, crying crocodile tears. So she was not only not persuaded that Rudy Giuliani was entitled to any relief, but she was pretty dismissive of at least one of the claims he was making. So, now, of course, there's always another appeal, isn't there? So Rudy Giuliani has already announced, not surprisingly, he will appeal this up to the D.C. Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. And I have to tell you, Brian, I have a strong sense that they will probably also affirm this massive defamation judgment against Rudy Giuliani, because we all saw what he did. He did it publicly. He did it nefariously. He did it repeatedly. In fact, he continued to defame those two Georgia state election workers on the steps of the courthouse while the trial was in progress. I don't see any relief coming Rudy's way.
Glenn, after the D.C. Court of Appeals, is the U.S. Supreme Court the next step?
It is, but, I would be surprised. Now, they've surprised me several times in recent years, like when they revoked women's constitutional privacy rights. I'd be surprised if they accepted review of this, civil money judgment. Doesn't seem like there is any constitutional issue at play. So, I do not see the Supreme Court granting review of this case.
Glenn, if Giuliani's completely broke, what happens next? Like, how do the plaintiffs, for example, Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman, get their money?
Yeah, well, listen, Rudy has a high-dollar apartment in New York. He's got a condo down in Florida. He has some assets. So there are some legal mechanisms available to the plaintiffs to try to go after whatever assets Rudy Giuliani may still have. Of course, Brian, you may remember that I think it was a day or so after the jury verdict, Rudy Giuliani filed for bankruptcy. And actually, the bankruptcy case is ongoing right now because the court has to do a deep dive into his assets and has to decide how to divvy up those assets among his creditors, including satisfying this money judgment. But listen, the reality is you can't get blood from a stone, right? You can't get money from a broke Rudy Giuliani. So once his assets are completely depleted and divvied up, the only thing that the plaintiffs, Ruby Freeman and Shea Moss, will be able to do is make sure that any income he has coming in, they can attach his wages, they can garnish his wages, they can put liens on any properties he has, and they can do whatever they can to try to get some of that money sent to them to begin to fulfill the money judgment that they won against him. But sadly, the reality is I would be very surprised if the entire $148 million judgment that Shea and Ruby won against Rudy Giuliani ever gets fully satisfied.
Well, you'd mentioned garnishing his wages. From what? If I'm not mistaken, his D.C. law license was suspended. So what are the next steps for Giuliani on that? Is he ever going to be able to practice law again?
Yeah, both his D.C. law license and his New York law license have been suspended. Both, I think, are pending permanent revocation. And, the last thing I saw Rudy Giuliani doing that was earning him some money was, sending out birthday greetings to people at $50 a pop or whatever it is he's doing online to earn what little money he's capable of earning. But no, the reality is there's probably not going to be a lot of pots of money or an income stream to go after. But whatever Rudy is earning, you know what? It's not going to stay in Rudy's pocket long.
If I'm not mistaken, he's also got cases pending regarding a sexual harassment claim with his former associate. Her name is Noelle Dunphy, and with Dominion Voting Systems, which successfully settled with Fox News for a record $787.5 million. So really, what does Giuliani's future look like here? I mean, what happens when you have an already completely insolvent defendant like Giuliani, and then they just pile these losses on top of him? I mean, if he's looking at $148 million plus another $150-200 million on top of that, what happens?
Yeah, you know, if there was such a thing as debtor's prison, he would probably be occupying a cell, but there's not. So I think at this point, other people or other organizations that are suing Rudy Giuliani are going to have to make the calculation, you know, is it worth it to continue to go after him? And it may be worth it just as a matter of principle. The woman who accused him of sexual assault, or, you know, folks who still want to make a point that you can't bring all these frivolous lawsuits trying to undermine either a presidential election or the integrity of somebody's voting systems, because that can do real damage to a business. They may pursue these lawsuits anyway, even if they know they're kind of going after a dry financial well, because the principle may be just as important. And then they can get in line with other creditors to whom Rudy owes money, and you know, just wait to see if there is anything to make those judgments whole at the end of the day. Because there has been some reporting that he has a very high dollar value New York apartment. I don't want to spit out the amount I think I heard it was worth, but there has been some reporting recently about how he is going to have to sell that off and begin to satisfy some of these debts.
Glenn, who determines who gets paid first? So if Shea Moss and Ruby Freeman have already won their lawsuit against him for $148 million, and then he has, you know, his former employee or Dominion Voting Systems who win subsequent lawsuits against him, do they have to wait in line?
I'm going to decline to give our viewers a definitive answer because I've never been a bankruptcy attorney, and it is a very complex area of the law that I didn't have the patience for when I was in law school. What I will say is my general understanding when it comes to satisfying debts when somebody files bankruptcy is kind of first in, first out. If you are first in time having a debt owed to you by somebody who has filed for bankruptcy, you may be one of the first to collect. My understanding is also that a bankruptcy judge will apportion out sort of a percentage of the assets of a Rudy Giuliani, for example, and give a portion of it to each of the debtors that corresponds to the portion or the amount that Rudy owes them. Now, I know you can't discharge a civil judgment in bankruptcy, that I know, but I don't think, I would like this to be the case perhaps, but I don't think that Shea and Ruby's debt that Rudy now owes them sort of bumps ahead of the prior creditors that Rudy owes money to. But again, I'm going to defer to the bankruptcy experts in this arena.
And he also owes money, by the way, to the U.S. government because he has back taxes that he has failed to pay. So this guy is just a walking monetary issue as far as all the people that he owes money to. Glenn, let's finish off with this. What is your message for Trump attorneys out there still thinking that hitching their wagons to this walking, talking crime spree that is Donald Trump is somehow, on some planet, a good idea?
Run in the opposite direction. I see, I was talking to a fellow retired lawyer earlier today, and I love the Sixth Amendment and the right to counsel, right? We all have the right to counsel, zealous counsel, conflict-free counsel. But the question that I would pose to the people who continue to represent Donald Trump is, everybody has a right to counsel, even people who do horrific things, murder, rape, child abuse. Everybody has a right to counsel, and I would never argue against that. But when there's somebody who has not only committed democracy-busting crimes, they have a right to counsel, but that they continue to try to destroy our democracy and our institutions of government every day moving forward, that's a different kind of animal. That's a different kind of criminal defendant. And I guess I wonder aloud why people want to represent somebody who is still trying to destroy American democracy. That says nothing about his past crimes. If he was indicted for past crimes and he wised up and he was no longer trying to bring democracy down, then I could see somebody saying, listen, he may have done horrible things, but I'm here to represent him. But he's still doing it. And that's why I don't understand why people are drawn to him and they want to represent him, other than the notoriety. You think it's going to get you big clients in the future. Why they would choose to continue to help prop him up when everybody sees that he's still trying to destroy American democracy. His words, not mine. He wants to be a dictator on day one. I, for one, would not want to be a lawyer involved in the endeavor of helping him make that happen.
Not only that, but also to see what's come of the other lawyers who've hitched their wagons to his, from Rudy Giuliani to Kenneth Chesebro, Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell. I mean, none of these people are doing exactly too well here. So hopefully these people recognize the fates that await them by looking at these other lawyers, and they wise up, because hitching your wagon to Donald Trump has not been a good idea thus far. So with that said, Glenn and I will continue to follow not only what happens with this Giuliani trial and his efforts to appeal his rulings for these defamation judgments, but also the entirety of the Trump trial that's happening right now. So for those watching, if you want to follow along, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.